which is going to be about, we've done cargo bikes today, and we're looking forward to hearing a lot more from him. So welcome one and all, and I'll hand over to you, Michael.
Right, I'll say afternoon this time. So cargo bikes, and I thought we'll deliver better by cargo bike. So just a little bit about myself. I've been at Transport for London for 22 years, that is a fair old chunk of time. Got a background in security and construction. I did used to drive a lorry in my younger days, but my main focus now is on big chunky buildings. I do a lot of community work, working with sensitive members of the community. So I do a lot on disability, a lot of training, working with marshals and logistics teams. I also do a lot of work with emergency services, so London Ambulance, Fire Brigade and Police. Looking at helping construction sites be efficient, so and also making sure they're safe. One of the biggest challenges we have is underground. I call it underground freight, but yeah, looking at utilities and how we manage that better. Cycling is a big thing for me, but also focus on disabled cycling and public transport. And as today, modelled by my eldest son, cargo bikes. So just a little bit of history about cargo bikes. Been around since mid-1800s, since steel was in mass production and the pneumatic tyre was developed. And we were delivering by bike, so looking at milk, bread, meat and mail, which is and there's a gentleman who's on the meeting today. I've got a little bit of a drop of what they were doing, but their company has done exactly the same thing by using cargo bike for delivery. Now this is what they look like today. There's a variety. It's not just 2-wheel, 3-wheel, 4-wheel, 6-wheel, and potentially could be going up. But you've got adaptations of trailers as well. But some of the things that people need to be aware of now, biking's one thing and it isn't for everybody. But when you start looking at delivery, there's a lot of stuff that we need to consider. So there is legislation on this, a maximum output of 250 watts. That has to be pedal assisted. You are not allowed to move without pedaling. If you are doing that, you're kind of considered in the moped territory, and a license and a helmet. The bikes are called electrical assist powered cycles. We won't use the APC, I'll just use cargo bikes because it's simpler. And there are a lot of bikes out there that can do up to 65 kilometers an hour, I'm been made aware. And these are not the kind of bikes we want to be seen on the road at the moment. So the other thing is, if you're going to be putting cycles on the road, you need to be aware of the surroundings. Yep. Now, it's not a fantastic quality video. It just gives you a bit of an example of what you're in competition with on the road.
Right. So apparently she rang Sean.
And can everybody go on mute, please? That's what you call a close pass, probably within 300 millimetre of the rider. And cycling on London's roads, when you're on with a lot of traffic that's in a rush, can be quite frightening. And if you're going to be in charge of a fleet putting people on the road, you need to be aware of what they're going to be coming into contact with. So these bikes aren't little. They can go up to 3 meters in length and above, plus the trailer. And I always suggest that you do training when you're looking at getting on the roads, because 270 kilo gross doing over 15 mile an hour could do some damage to somebody. Plus handling the bike itself is different to a standard bike. Just a little example of me doing some training with pedal knee. And then the other stuff. So this is not set in place yet. So you don't have guidance on loads or weight at the moment. You'll use manufacturer's guarantee. What their guidance is, but some of the stuff we're working with on the police is making sure you can see ahead. Now there are some companies that are out there with loads that are up to the chin height, and which we strongly suggest not to do, because then if you can lose sight of a child crossing the road, this is the safety, and this is our children that's out there. So it's making sure you put in place nice standards to follow. And one of the things is why we're encouraging use. So yes, there's a lot of bikes out there, but a lot of people are using vans, and can we look at reducing the amount of vans? So the mayoral target is 10% reduction of HGVs and vans in the city. Vision Zero is we want 0 killed or seriously injured by 2041. Air quality improvements and climate. A little example, just looking at the queues of traffic there, but you've got the nice blue sections which aren't well used on that particular picture, but there's a big opportunity there. Now, this is what London likes using a Vision model. the red bits is what we don't want. The blue bits is when it's moving better. For those involved in logistics, you will be reliant on certain times to get your freight on site to its destination. And on top of that, you've got to consider the amount of roadworks, the other traffic, the other developments that's going on, and any other emergencies that could happen. And we're talking about vans. The bikes there are not to replace the van, it's to look at the inefficiency. Now, Jacques Leonardi from Westminster did a lot of study on this, and this shows 65% of vans are idle, empty, and stationary. Now, if you've got a van that's going out empty, you're not utilising it properly. So why don't we look at that space that's not been utilised? That could go on a different form of transport. And when we say, can cargo bikes help reduce HGVs and vans? Yes, they can. Now, if you look at this queue on the right, if we can take some of those vans and put them in the cycle lane, that could then reduce the amount of traffic problems we have at those junctions. A lot of construction sites will set in place contingencies to meet with demand, as in
Michael, you've muted.
Can everybody hear me now? Yeah, okay. Now, do I need to repeat that section? Just stick your hand. Stephen, did you catch the whole lot of that section? Just put your hand up. So what we're talking about here is you've got a cycle lane and you've got a few vehicles, which are vans. If we can take those vans out of the queue and stick them on the blue bits, we help improve capacity of the junction. And construction traffic, or say, for example, a construction site has a contingency to meet with delay caused by congestion. So if we can remove the need for contingency, we can help traffic flow better, and that would then reduce the amount of HGVs and vans on the road. Now, it is a good business model. It's not just about using a bike to reduce the environmental impacts. If you're looking at fuel costs, a bike is a lot cheaper. Yes, you will have to charge for electric, but it's a lot smaller motor. Insurances are cheaper, serving costs are cheaper. You don't tend to get penalty charges for parking. Congestion charging you won't get hit with, and the tax of the vehicle at the moment. And you're looking at potential good chunk of savings there. So giving it a go. So we've got a bit of background on the bikes. How do we then progress it? So what we've been doing is either taking the water to the horse. So we will take a cargo bike to a company and show them what they are, or we will do some trials with those companies. And this is just some examples. So top left is doing a delivery of signs and PPE for Lambeth Council on one of their schemes. Bottom left, a delivery for Mace. In the middle was just an introduction of the bike. Bottom right was delivering hydrogen cylinders for a TfL project. So this was actually a proper delivery for an actual scheme that's ongoing. And on the top right section was during a little event where we were showing people that what the bikes can actually do and what they can carry. So putting into small business, JG McCoy have been using bikes for a little while now. There was a little bit of nervousness on using them in the first place, but once you get going, it's a nice, easy thing to use because they are going to deliver the same as what a van would do. And it's looking at the savings. So this is an example at Crossrail. So the red route on the right-hand side is if you were using a van, you would have to go to a holding area to have a force compliance check. And the blue is because it's a bike, you didn't need to do that. You could go straight to site. And savings of 31 minutes is good, number one. I'm not going to talk about the money difference, but you're looking at 50% savings potentially on the costs. And the benefit for the rider is the calories you're going to burn while doing it. Now, JG McCoy now try and do this where they can, which is a nice business model for them. And supply chain. So the supply chain for us are probably the most important people to start working with. These are the guys that do deliver to construction sites. Speedy have done over 80 deliveries so far. HSS have done a trial and now purchasing a bike, and Gap have started trialing. So the idea is now is that we get that domino effect, so a lot more people start buying into this. And developers as well, so all the principal contractors. This was a nice little collaboration between Structure Tones, Robert McAlpine and Mace, where we shared one bike between them to do some collections, but also supporting the local community. And there's 46 lunches collected on that one day. and TfL. So it's pointless me saying to everybody else to do it, but TfL not to. We're working with our contractors now. So this is an example of Ringways on the right and Kier on the left. And I'll talk about FM Conway in a minute, but it's getting used to what the bikes can do around construction on our network. So if you're building a cycleway, it makes sense to use a bike to deliver for part of the works of the cycleway. And for FM Conway, who are doing the Illuminated River project, and that's majority of bridges along the Thames within the city area. It's going to be the world's largest outdoor art project. At a meeting when we were looking at the logistics, I asked them how you deliver to site. They said by van. I said, would you be willing to deliver by bike? Their response was, you can't use a bike for construction delivery. So we talked to the head of structures, who's on the picture on the bottom left, who's far right. Well, let's go out and show you what a bike does. Both of the gentlemen from FM Conway were grinning and loved the ride. So they were willing to take it further. We did some off-road tests. We looked at what they were delivering to site, put them on the bike, had a little ride around their yard. We also looked at the weight. So there are 25 kilo sandbags in there to see how the bike handles. The next bit we did was a route and risk assessment to see how the bikes would safely arrive at the destination along the River Thames. The two areas, the red dash line and the blue and the black section. One of the things we do need to consider is security. So you'll have certain loads that you have to think about. Now, going through council estates could put people at a slight concern of what they're carrying, because once you know that what the bikes are doing, you might know what they're carrying. But we'd say look at going at areas where there's a lot of natural surveillance, you're in the public eye more. So the black route was through bus lanes, and then once you get on the red, that was on protected cycle infrastructure all the way to the Thames, and then you've got cycleway 3. So you're probably looking around 70–80% of cycling infrastructure to get to site. That was then left with FM Conway to design what they wanted to do. And then within a couple of weeks, they decided they were going to buy a bike. Now they've had them for quite a while now, over 5,600 kilometers. This was a few weeks back where they gave me this detail, looking at a ton of CO2 savings, delivering lighting equipment, brackets, PPE, traffic cones, you can read that. But also the benefit, you could do stuff for the local community on top. As I'm aware, they're the first construction company to own a bike and actually have them in ongoing and doing work. But also you need to be aware about challenges with using cargo bikes. Now the infrastructure we have isn't always designed for a larger bike to get through. So if I go through from top left, this is in Vauxhall, very sharp bends there. So a 3-meter bike is likely to come into conflict with oncoming cyclists. The hostile vehicle mitigation one in the top middle is a maximum of 1.2 meters wide. Now, if you've got a load that's 1.2 meters, that is tight to get through. So you do have to consider your width of your load. Certain routes have what's called kissing gates, or sort of narrow areas to stop mopeds getting through. That will also stop a cargo bike getting through. Being aware of the community that you're coming into contact with. So the bottom left, people will step out onto a cycle lane with their phone. There are adults with learning difficulties, people using wheelchairs, visually impaired. This all needs to be taken into consideration. So you want your rider to be riding well, and he's representing your company. And the other thing is competing cyclists. So if you look at the one in the middle, bottom middle, the queue, if you add a couple of cargo bikes into there, the likelihood of some people being encouraged to red light jump goes up. So we need to start considering that. And the last thing is weather, whether it's rain, heavy rain, really cold, icy conditions. And there are companies out there still doing this. So if they can do it, we know we can, but there's also something to consider. Now, I stuck this on because of code of conduct. So TfL have been working with a company to put this out. So it's, if somebody's representing you, you want them to keep your name in place. Now I've got a couple of examples here, if it plays. And I'm not going to say what he's doing wrong because I think you can work that one out. So off he goes. I'm kind of waiting for him to go on the road. Now, if you imagine that said Mace, Lango Rourke, and Jones Brothers on the side of that, I don't think you'd be too impressed with your rider. Now, one of the big concerns here, if you imagine you forced a pedestrian to walk into the road and then they got hit by a vehicle. And then he decides to just pull out in front of the cyclist. So yeah, you wouldn't want your company name on the side of that. But also the safety of the riders. Now, if you're putting riders under pressure like an HGV driver, you don't drive as well. And this rider's gone for a red light. That is a 32-ton tipper, could have taken him out there. Now, for the driver of the truck, that's not fair to have behaviours like that in front of him when he's got that kind of load on. So it's just making sure that, you know, there are eyes and ears out on the network that can feed back on that. And other challenges we have, so when we've got like the FM Conway model, you've got nice infrastructure around you. What happens if you don't? And this is an example of working with Brent Council and St George, part of the Barclay Group. We introduced them to Raleigh, so they had a little go with the bikes in the car park. They liked the idea of using it. You've got Park Royal Industrial Estate right next to him, which is, I've just put on the map on the left where Screwfix is. So we did a little risk assessment trial to see what it's like from going from site to Screwfix, either on the road or on the available cycle infrastructure. This was on the road. One of the issues is the amount of HGVs. And if you look at the bottom left side, you'll see the post office truck. And the lady who's riding the cargo bike did not feel comfortable with wagons like that coming past her. And if you're a person that's on your own on a bike, then you are more vulnerable. It's better in a group. It's also being aware of some of the vehicle speeds and the behaviours. And then when you're looking at the cycle infrastructure, again, it wasn't that great. People will block it. You're looking at ambush points that if you're top right hand side, somebody could be waiting for you there to catch you out because there's not a lot of activity. Narrow routes as well. So if you've got a parent with a buggy coming towards you on that middle section, but also looking at cyclist dismount. Can't really dismount with a cargo bike. So it's working with the council of, you know, what is a nice route. There are going to be some change at this junction, but we're still waiting for that. And then do you decide, I don't want a rider to go on there because there's too much risk, or we'll put in measures to make sure, which such as good training, PPE, working with the Met as well, just to get to feedback on behaviours from externals. So logistics is an important thing. So what we do with HGVs, we will do as much as we can to make it as efficient as possible. Includes training marshals, looking at strategies for HGVs, holding areas. And if you're going to get more bikes into the mix, we need to start thinking about bikes a lot more. So I've just used this example from Hackney Council. This is the Britannia project, and that's the blue area on the left-hand side. We work with the council. This is adjacent to Cycleway 1. So we shut 2 main roads to accommodate cycling and freight traffic. So the green hoarding, freight vehicles go behind that just for site specific, and then the cyclists are kept segregated as well as pedestrians. And then the idea of having this is it would make sense to have bike deliveries. So what we did on here, we get a segregated section, which is the top picture, which was dedicated for the cargo bike rider to come up, unload. So he's only got a short walk to the gate. The marshals were trained on how to manage the bikes, because initially they didn't know what to do with the bike when it turned up. There's a nice little example on the bottom right of what we did with Mace. There's a little pop-up area for a cargo bike, and that was away from HGVs. And it's putting together a nice package, so you are considering those bikes. And going from here now is there's a lot more thinking of what we need to be doing in planning. So London cycle infrastructure is increasing, so there's more opportunity now to have safer cycling around the capital. But then some of the challenges we have is roadworks. So roadworks are always going to happen. We will always need new utilities or emergency works undertaken. The cyclist dismount sign is probably one of the most hated signs for cyclists in general, especially disabled cyclists. But for cargo bikes and shutting routes is not great. So it's how do we now start to incorporate the thinking of a larger bike when we're doing cycling infrastructure around traffic management. This is a little example we did with St George in Blackfriars Road. Now that route was designed around the cargo bike, not around the ordinary cyclist. So the ramps were nice and smooth, so you wouldn't bottom out coming up. But also we put super elevation on the curves. So the picture that's on the bottom right, just behind that rider, is a ramp that comes down, had a rise of 10%. So it's like a racetrack, helps you get around that bend. Some three-wheel cycles might feel like you're going to get your weight displaced when you go around a bend. So if you help them a little bit with a bit of super elevation, makes a difference. And now there are tools to help that out. So Sustrans have just developed a sweat path analysis. And this was a little set of works that we've got further down on Blackfriars. We just tested it out. And if you want to know roughly what a bike's or how a bike's going to be getting through your traffic management, it's a nice little way of an addition to be considering. So ideally, looking at construction sites, where possible, we put in a freight route for cyclists through a site, as well as having a lorry route. That is keeping everything segregated. And I know that I'm hoping we get some questions on that kind of approach. But yes, you will need a certain amount of space, but the more you plan for stuff, the better you can allocate your area. Micro consolidation is getting quite popular now. Not so much with construction as yet, but I'm hoping it's going to raise up. Again, I've nicked some stuff from Jacques Leonardi. But if you're looking at bringing your traffic in, it's nice to have a little space where you can consolidate your loads and then bring them in as you need them, which makes it a bit easier. It's also less stress for the highway authority, so you're not having a lot of stacking at site. But with bikes, this would be a nice way to do sticking a vehicle like this one, like a trailer, or utilizing some car park space, and then having a bike running backwards and forwards, which is a nice environmental way. Plus, it's an efficient way of doing things. Now, what we're doing at the moment, we've got a cargo bike and construction working group, so people are invited to come to that. This is, at the moment, it's national, so we've got across the country turning up. It's growing. The list on the left-hand side is getting bigger and bigger the more we do these presentations. We are writing a guidance document, so this will go out to the industry on how to incorporate in the thinking around getting a bike on the road. And then also, how do we work with planning teams? So the planning is one of the key things. Once you've got a developer on board at planning, he can then pass that down to his contractor. So the construction logistics plans are really important to consider. And I just thought I'd finish on a nice story. So we talked about the 1800s, and I know Stephen can put me right at 1870 something. Stephen, what year?
Yeah, 1877.
1877. So Jones Brothers were using bikes in 1877. Then they went to lorries, to vans, and we are now doing a full circle to go back to trying bikes. And I think this is a nice story of positive regression. I'll just leave that picture on. And that was some of the wives. Was it the wives that were doing the deliveries during the war?
The sisters.
The sisters were doing the deliveries during the war. And it just shows that cycling's for everybody. Not everybody wants to drive a lorry. Well, not everybody wants to do a cycle, but it's an easier way to get around. There's a lot of mental health and well-being benefits, as well as keeping you fit. And as long as you've got the right infrastructure, you know, it's a nice method. And what I like to say at the end is, if we all go above and beyond becomes business as usual. And it's utilizing cargo bikes as it's a nice method to put in place in your logistics. Yes, it doesn't fit everything. It's not going to answer all the questions, but it goes towards helping us reach those targets. And I'm going to stop there and invite for question time. So Laura, did you want to come back in? You'll be able to see more people on there.
Yep. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for that, Michael. That was really, really interesting. We've had a lot of people putting things in the chat, but I can't see that we've had any questions yet. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask Michael about this or anything to do with cargo bikes, or I'm sure he'd even be happy to answer, you know, general logistics questions around transportation and things around London, then let us know.
Can I come in on one thing? I've just posted a couple of little stories about rapid delivery. I had something myself. I was doing a job in Birmingham and I needed some small tools on site. Phoned up the local cycle logistics operator. They went to tool station, picked up the stuff, and it was on site office before 12:45. Quite often when you want stuff from wholesalers and you order online, you've got an overnight wait where it goes on the night trunk up from a central warehouse. How can we get the thinking of people like tool stations, Screwfix, that they can work with a local cycle logistics operator, and so when you need something in a hurry, you just pick up the phone and it's on your desk within an hour?
I think a lot of this will be client nudged. So say, for example, the one in the Screwfix one we talked about in Brent, if St. George are then encouraging to accept or to get involved with delivery, they're more likely to do that. Again, it's on that, something from TfL and the borough can nudge companies to do that, but it's got to be a lot of it will be money led.
I think that just to come in there, Michael, in that regard, I think that's where BITA can be actually very advantageous. You know, we as a community and as an ecosystem are growing, but equally the messages that we put out there are very important. And we have several events of which you've been to on a frequent basis, like the luncheons events, and we would be delighted to put these types of messages out at those events and bring those. So when you have specific questions like that, please do direct them to us as an organization, because we are the organic collective. We have all these people as our members. And if we know what question to ask these people on a regular basis, we have different ways of doing it. We can do it through the magazine. We can do it through online events like this. We can do it luncheon events. And that is the collective scrum that BITA provides you as. So, you know, if you haven't been aware of the organization or want to be aware of the organization, I've left my details online, as will Laura, but that is the power of what BITA can do. That is the power of the collective, and that is what we are all about as an organization. So we can actually go to the likes of Speedy, the likes of Screwfix, and we can tell them what you want them to hear.
I think that sounds good, definitely. Any more questions, Laura?
We haven't had anybody come through. Hakeem was asking who we are. So I did put an answer in there, but we are the British and Irish Trading Alliance. We're a non-profit organisation working to promote and grow businesses across the UK and Ireland in the ways that Paul mentioned. And I've put in a link there to the website. I've just had one question come through from Rachel York. Have planning departments of local authorities been approached to get them on board with condition wording to encourage CB, use and give guidance? TfL, city planning and legal colleagues alternatively could help.
Yeah, no, we're already talking to a lot of planning teams, especially TfL. And the happy one was what started it off when we looked at the logistics. So the Britannia type, it's a work in progress. So it's now going to be part of CLP training or construction logistics plan training. We've been working with SETB, they're on behalf of Clocks for the CLP training, and also London councils. So we presented to London councils on cargo bikes, and they are now aware of this. So people are getting on board. It was a little bit slow in the beginning, so this is probably about 3 years work, but it's speeding up now. And you can see from the pictures we had, I'll just go backwards here. That's a few people already that have been getting involved and trialing.
So Michael, in terms of the COVID situation, how has that actually helped you in implementing things like this? Because this is a lot about cultural change in terms of people, what they've been doing, used to doing, and what you want them to do and take into consideration now. Surely the COVID situation has helped you greatly in slowing down the busyness of, we'd say, London, and creating a bit of room for you to actually maneuver in showing people how to use a cargo bike and all that kind of stuff. Has this period helped you?
Yes. So especially with food deliveries, food banks, cargo bikes have been massive. I think they've come into their own. So it's a nice, easy way of getting a bike out. A lot of people there's been so many groups that have been set up since COVID who deal with cargo bikes across the country, and the thousands of miles of deliveries from bike now is great to hear, but it's also encouraged a lot of other people. So as more people have looked at exercise themselves, walking and cycling, they're seeing things. When you cycle and walk, you see more. When you're driving, you don't tend to see stuff. So you'll notice now when you're walking on the street, you'll see cargo bikes. Oh, there's one. The way you wouldn't probably have noticed it before if you were driving. But yeah, COVID has, but it's an awakening time.
So Michael, Jean-Claude has got his hand up, so he would like to ask a question. If you want to unmute yourself, Jean-Claude.
Yep, hello there.
Hi there.
How's it going, Michael, everybody else? Yeah, so I'm a very keen user of cargo bikes, and I've been working with one of the companies that's highlighted on the slides there, called Pedal Me, in the sense that I rode for them for a while, received their training as a result, and then I've been actually using an Urban Arrows XL, which is the same bike that Conway are using, as a platform for an outdoor hardware business. So I've actually been building fencing and decking using a bike, and I put a picture of a loaded bike in the chat. So unfortunately it hasn't previewed, so you'd have to click it to see the image, but it's impressive, I think, what you can get on there. There's a medium duty breaker, there's various digging tools and what have you, all sorts of bits and pieces. My question is about fleets, and if large constructors who have got 12 plus ton lorries, I think you mentioned a 32 ton tipper there, Michael, are going to be incorporating cargo bikes into their fleets. I think it'd be good to think about all of the pilots of vehicles, so whether it's a bike or a big truck, and sort of help to see from each other's points of view, because being a cargo bike rider on the road compared to driving a huge truck is such a different experience. So my question is, is there going to be a holistic approach where constructors are involved to encourage them to get their drivers of bigger vehicles to think about the drivers of their same company's smaller vehicles, what their road experience is like?
Well, all the training you've got through Fours and Clocks now is to understand about I don't like to use the word vulnerable road user, but about the smaller vehicles that are around you. And there's a lot of changes with the direct vision standards for HGVs, but yes, within your fleet, I think probably a little bit subjective. I'll bring in Adrian Broughtflower in a minute to get his perspective, because he deals with a lot, he specializes on freight. But looking at how, if you just got a fleet of trucks, the drivers won't be aware of some of the challenges that people have with smaller vehicles, especially cycles.
And they're quite odd vehicles. One of the things I experience as a rider is often drivers kind of disparage you for being on a cargo bike. So, that's...
Yeah, it's changing cultures. So the more of them about, people accept them. I've got my own cargo bike, which I take my daughter out in. And I also do all the shopping, stuff like that. But yeah, I've got that awareness, but I've also been a lorry driver, so I can understand both perspectives. And both have got challenging roles. But yeah, there will be a collaboration within a company, because you will be together as a group. Right, Dave, did you want to come in?
Yeah, catch up with Jean-Claude. We've got share screen enabled, so if he's got something he wants to bring up, just use share screen. If that's okay with you, Michael.
Yeah, do you want to? I'll take mine off. Do you want to share your screen, Laura? He should be able to share his screen in this picture.
Yeah. Give me a moment. I'll just select the right window to share. You should be able to see it now, hopefully. Am I on my browser? Or
Yeah, we can see that.
Fine. So I'm trying to show you. Let me show you this other one first, actually. Sorry, I wasn't quite prepared for that, but it won't take a sec. So here we go. So this is the bike that's loaded with the construction gear.
It hasn't gone large. We're only looking at your file image.
There you go. Can you see that now?
Not come up this side.
Oh, apologies.
We can get a view of what you got there. It's full.
Yeah. I'm just trying to see if I can put it into a browser window. Unfortunately not. I'll stop that for the moment and let me just fiddle about, and I'll get that working again.
Okay. Michael, we did have another question from Wendy. She's asking, what is it that advocates can do to promote this? And I assume that's uptake of cargo bike usage.
And which Wendy was this?
Wendy Bates.
Right, well, Wendy will know. I think FM Conway have been quite good for us, I think, for the industry to take that lead and jump in. So yeah, for advocates, majority of companies will have a corporate social responsibility or a corporate social responsibility page on their website. This is another way of helping promote sustainable transport. but it's also, if you're looking at being an advocate, there's opportunities there to bring a lot of new entrepreneurship into the business. So I've just got a massive picture of my face now, which is really off-putting. I think I preferred it when it was just on the screen.
I'll make you back.
Yeah, if you can put us back on the grid, that's a lot easier. But yeah, no,
Am I muted at the moment, Michael?
you aren't muted at the moment, Dave.
Can you unmute me, or do I have to do it myself? I've got a problem here.
Yeah, if you look at the bottom left of your screen, you should have a mute button with a little microphone.
I can mute you. He's muted.
Yeah, but so when we're talking about Conway are doing a really good job, and I think if people can follow what Conway do, I don't want to big up Conway too much, but it's as Wendy's as Wendy's online, but yeah, if they can kind of follow in Conway's steps, I think that'd be a nice thing.
Okay, and I've just had another notification that there's somebody else who's raised their hand, but it's Paul Whitnell.
Yeah, just for the benefit of Dave Holiday. So in the chat he said, Paul, who are we? So just I don't want to steal Michael's thunder or anything like that, but maybe for those people that don't understand or haven't come across BITA. BITA is a non-for-profit organization that I set up 10 years ago. And the purpose of the organization was for people to come together. So someone asked me what BITA was, and I said it's people who know people that help people. And over the years, we've been very much involved with Michael Barratt and TfL in various things that he wanted to communicate to the community, the ecosystem that is BITA. So BITA is an organization that can help you grow your business through the connections of others. And what we do and pride ourselves in doing, it's generosity of spirit, it's passion, and it's delivery. And what we do as an organization is we create events, we create opportunities for you as a company to have growth in your business through the contacts and connections with others. There's nothing in it for us, there's no catch. It is very much, as it says on the tin, people who know people that help people. And as I say, we have been delighted to have people like Michael Barratt support us as we support him, and other many companies that are here, like Conway's, for instance. I'm looking forward to meeting Wendy at a luncheon that we have coming up in London on the 25th of June. And that's an example of one of the events that we set up where we have 250 people in the room with a common goal of creating and communicating opportunity with each other. So that is BITA. My name is Paul Whitnell. I'm the president and founder of the organization. So hopefully, Dave, that answers your question as to who are we.
Brilliant. Jean-Claude has just sent me a message and said he's ready to go with the picture.
Yeah, do you want to try it again, Jean-Claude?
Yeah, let me give that a try.
And while he's getting that up, Hakeem has said that he is looking to get cargo bikes for his company, his service providers. So I'm sure you'll be happy to connect with him, Michael, should you have any follow-up questions.
Yeah, we're already linked.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
That is indeed packed, Jean-Claude.
Yeah, hang on. I'm actually struggling here more than I ever normally do. Bear with me a second.
I'll tell you what, while you're doing that, Jean-Claude, I'm just going to put it out. So Adrian from Metz, or is it Mace Dragados?
Well, it depends on, good afternoon, everybody. It depends on how you determine. My parent company is Mace, but I'm currently working for Mace Dragados on HS2 Euston Station.
Yeah, so what's your thought? Because we've had I don't know if you're aware, there have been a couple of deliveries to HS2 through Speedy.
Yeah.
It's how you within the business is encourage it more to look at, it's a nice, what Wendy was saying is in the industry is how to promote this further.
So Mace will always support these things, as you know, but unfortunately, as often is the case, we're driven by clients and their requirements. Now, I'm not trying to push the buck, but we need to encourage the clients to get involved and give direction for that. The construction industry isn't the greatest at coming forward. I've been doing this now, having worked in this construction logistics industry now for over 15 years, both as a subcontractor in construction logistics, working for TfL as part of the freight team, part of that team that originally wrote the FORS standard, I'm part of the clocks working group. I'm currently the chair of the FORS executive group. So I do know my stuff in that regard. So cycle safety training, for example, is and can be picked up through the FORS process, as Michael rightly said. Encouraging others to do so, we need to direct at clients. We need to get the British Lands, the land securities of this world, other major developers to say, come on, Mr. Construction guy, where is your support for this kind of process? Where are you working at? Yes, we, the principal contractors, need to do our own piece for that, but ultimately we are guided by what the client directs and what the client provides funds for.
I think when you have a client though, Adrian, this is, again, they've had to go through planning permission first. And this is where the Highway Authority should be coming into play more.
Absolutely. So there's a whole range of things. So that's where, as you mentioned quite rightly, construction logistics plans come in. They're really, really key, and I'm a strong believer in that process. I might sound a tad negative. Michael knows me otherwise. I do fully believe it. It's just difficult trying to convince hard construction people of the right way to go about these things and to take these great initiatives on board.
So just a quick one to the audience then. So how many people have got area working planning departments or planning teams? I just wonder if that person could mute, something like Darth Vader.
Okay, I think that's we've had 2 questions come through. If people want to put if they work in planning in the chat function, perhaps. But did you want me to go through the questions, Michael?
Yeah, yes, please.
Oh, Jean-Claude's sharing.
We finally got there.
But he's muted, so if you're saying anything, Jean-Claude, we cannot hear you.
That's not a bad thing, eh, Jean-Claude? That's very impressive.
Yeah, that's packed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you that's the bike, but as I was saying in the chat, we're actually then using them for community outreach, and that's where it gets kind of a bit more interesting, is when they're stacked like this. So when, Adrian, you're trying to, impress upon British Land, the likes of British Land, for example, then it's a good idea to increase the use of this. I mean, I've got an ally there called Rose Alexander, who's one of the community managers on the British Land estate. And she's actually endorsed my company's activities using these types of bikes on their plazas and so on. And yeah, I'd also just mention to Paul that if you've got an event on the 25th of June, then I'd happily bring it up in this kind of mode so that we could do a bit of public announce rather outside, and get people around the bike. But yeah, it's a good vibe when they're rolling like this, putting smiles on people's faces, and obviously when they're rolling.
It's Adrian Borflag again, if I may.
Yeah.
Whilst, as I've said, I fully support this. Unfortunately, my health and safety managers would take one look at both of those bikes and query the safety of the loading.
Yeah, I'll just share the screen back again. So just bear me.
Sure. I mean,
I'm not criticising. I'm just saying that's another angle.
We don't move it in that mode with the speakers.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we're saying, Adrian. So
piece of rope tying or what appeared to be a piece of rope tying the tools to the bike. There will be questions raised. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Have we got Met Police on? Sergeant Wilson, are you on?
It's where it gets spicy.
I'm here.
Yeah. Hi, Steve. How's it going? So just for people's awareness, you're right with Steve.
Yeah, so I'm Sergeant Steve Wilson from the Metropolitan Police. I run the cycle safety team. So I've been working with Michael on on the guidance documentation that he's putting together. Things like we would have is while the vehicle is in motion, incredibly important to have good visibility, be aware of the stacking, and also be consideration of obstructions or items that you are strapping down and how they will react in the event of a collision. Obviously, the first one you saw with all the tools on it, there's a lot of tools there. You've got to be aware of how they're going to come apart in the event of a collision, or what was going to happen if things like that large spirit level, was to collide with someone that's been made of metal, and it being loose is going to become a projectile in the road space. So we advocate about the use of not just straps, but also potentially tarps, securing it down and also strapping it down to ensure sharp edges don't become an additional hazard in the event of a collision. And you would see this in variations around other road vehicles on the road. You know, we don't allow people with significant damage to the front of their vehicle to drive without taking steps to secure that. Strap it down and tape it down, and we would have exactly the same issue with those, is to make sure that when the vehicle is in motion, then not only is it just being secured, but also being covered appropriately, visibility and sight lines available for the rider. Certainly in built up areas, you've got to be aware of people stepping out in front. Not everyone looks at pays as much attention to the road where they're crossing as they should. We're all very familiar with the iPhone zombie who steps out in front, looking down at their screen, don't always pay attention. And while cargo bikes might not be traveling as fast as some of our faster bike commuters, they are going to have more mass. So again, our force calculations are speed times mass. More mass, don't need as much speed, you can injure people. So again, we are looking at this, and much like what Michael said about exposure, you know, we've got a branded bike and your has unfortunately been involved in a collision. We've got to look at how the perception is there, as well as just whether you have done anything actually wrong. But the perception, if the device is overloaded or looks insecure, we have to have the backup to say, you know, I can see 6 meters in front of me, I have visible sight lines to the left and to the right, and also not just a case of can I balance it, but how does it react in the event that I do come off or I do get collided with. And we don't want things flying off and becoming flying projectiles.
I think that's where the training comes in, isn't it? In terms of visibility, and it's not to be overly defensive about either of those loads. As I said, with the speakers, we weren't moving it. With the tools, everything was extremely secure, despite how you might think it looks. The inner tubing, in terms of like holding that down. But I do take the point on the cowling. That's something that Michael's said for some time now, that yeah, that's a really important part, just being able to cover everything. And the other thing that I would say to that is just the infrastructure, isn't it? And just being able to use completely segregated infrastructure. So you are apart from pedestrians, particularly, and other road users.
So again, Jean-Claude, if I may, and appreciate the comments and accept them with regards to the loads of the vehicles, etc., etc. But be advised, if you're going to show those kind of pictures, they're not necessarily, certainly in the construction world, people are going to do what I've done, and they might be slightly less charitable about it.
If I show, I'll just jump in a second.
But the other one is with regards to training. Yes, I agree with you about training lorry drivers and van drivers as well, and even potentially car drivers to be more cognizant of cyclists, let alone these great ideas of these cycle cargo bikes. We do need to try and consider, and this is always a contentious point when I raise it, the training of the cyclists in their use of those bicycles as opposed to normal bicycles. Yeah. It's a really contentious issue, but cyclists do have a responsibility themselves to their conduct. This
is what we're talking about, Adrian, on the code of conduct.
Yeah.
I'll just flick back to, where are we? Probably a little bit higher down, lower down.
Can I put a point in here? I've been walking across a great spectrum, picking up on Steve's point. Anything that's done for profit, you balance the duty of care to prevent harm against the prerogative of making a profit. So we have regulation for HGVs, we have regulation for public service vehicles. We don't have regulation for small vans, and we don't have regulation for cargo bikes. So there may be some relevance to what sort of regulation system we have for people who are operating commercially with vehicles. We see it with small vans, because the small van man can go 3 years without an MOT on a vehicle that's being hammered. Whereas if you've got an HGV, you've got to have a monthly check and an annual MOT. So there may be some relevance in seeing how we can regulate the field. The UK Cycle Logistics people are doing a lot for that. And in terms of projections, I did bike racks on buses back in 1996. And Sergeant Wilson will probably coming in on this, that the forward-facing radius has got to be no less than 2.5 metres on anything projecting at the front. That put quite clearly on vehicles, but not on bikes. So any thoughts on that?
And that goes to Sergeant Wilson, I take it, Dave? Or is that open?
Well, general, I mean, Sergeant Wilson's probably well versed on construction and use regulations, and as yet, we don't have any sort of really clear construction and use regulations on bicycles.
I think the benefits for working with the construction industry, Steve, is the health and safety element to making sure we are, and it's I see the construction industry helping with setting the standards, because you, especially as it's your name branded on potentially on the side or one of your contractors.
Well, I mean, one thing we don't have on the highway, we don't have, Tom Bogdanowicz of London Cycling Campaign's been doing it, bidding my ear on this. We don't have a highway accident investigation branch the same way we have rail, air and marine. If there's a major smash on the railway, there is a report and it's published. Sergeant Wilson may well pick up on this, but I got from the investigation people at the Met that 80% of the HGV cyclist fatalities are initiated when the HGV hits the back of the bike. It's not the cyclist going down the inside or anything like that. It's the poor vision that the driver has of the bike, and also the arrangement of road geometry that puts them into that cockpit. And we did one at Vernon Place. 2 deaths in 5 years, identical crashes, because a large vehicle could not turn the corner, which was a 4-metre radius, without being in the outside lane on the other side of the road. And the driver of the large vehicle then had to force priority over the traffic in the near side lane to make the left turn. The solution there was to ban the left turn, but it took another 5 years after the second fatality before that actually happened.
No, anything like this is tough, especially the red tape that you have to go through. But what I was saying is that as the infrastructure improves, I've just brought up. Let me just take up the Conway again. So for me, this is really important: is the route and risk assessment. So the risk assessment, we're looking at the load you're carrying, and the dynamics of your team. So FM Conways have done sitting gills training, and it's been aware of that, looking at assessing the loads, looking at assessing the routes. So the more you are segregate for the larger vehicle, the easier thing should be. But then what Steve's mentioned is also, but then you're coming into conflict with pedestrians and other cyclists. So yeah, we all have to work together on this to make sure it's set to a good standard. And it's early days yet. So what I mentioned before, the only legislation we've really got is about the 250-watt motor. There's nothing else on top. So we're basing stuff on manufacturers' standards, what they're putting forward, and then what we can kind of set as a best practice.
I think the industry's health and safety side of it very much is that the trained health and safety, because you've got to be for a health and safety officer to objectively look at what goes wrong, to pick out what needs to be fixed, and then to feed it in to getting it fixed. Another interesting statistic, we're talking about footway cycling, is that you're between 4 and 8 times more likely to crash if you cycle on a footway, because it's not designed to take your work that Sussbrand has done on the dynamic envelope of a cargo bike.
Yeah.
You've got to use the infrastructure that's fit for it. Yeah. If you try and use it that's not fit for it, you've got a problem. Yeah,
this is where it's all moving forward from what we're doing now. So yes, looking at what event. So Sweat Paths is a guide. It's like with a truck. I don't always rely on sweat path analysis to understand how an articulate vehicles negotiating traffic management, but it's there as a guide and helps you out. But yeah, but you see where this is going. That is to get this topical conversation out there, see what people think, and moving in the right direction is to do it sensibly. So making sure people are trained properly, make sure you're understanding what the loads are, making sure all the conflicts that could happen. Don't just rush out there and get on a bike and off you go. And then what Adrian was saying is, yeah, looking at making sure it's all, because all it'll take is one issue that could scupper a whole lot of work. And
Michael, it's Adrian again, just to support what you're saying. Absolutely right. the phrase "you can't make an omelette without cracking eggs" might be a little bit severe in this term, but the principle behind we're starting somewhere on a journey here, and a very exciting and important journey. But you're quite right, we cannot rush in. The police, quite rightly, haven't got the same level of sort of regulations that construction and use give them with regards to vehicles and other standards for HGVs and other standards for cars and vans. But there are some regulations out there, but practicality, training, health and safety, risk assessments, planning it through will overcome most of those issues.
Yeah. And we've got David's on from HSS. Dave Branch, you still here?
Yeah, I am, Michael. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. So this is something we've been discussing, isn't it? Is not to rush, looking at working towards something, working with the rider.
So just quickly, yeah, for our bit, from HSS Hire Group, we purchased one of these fantastic bikes. It's going to be delivered in the next couple of weeks, Michael, just so you know. I've had the delivery instructions, and we found the driver, the cyclist, and we've also had some training for him, and also gone through a number of KPIs, key performance indicators that we needed to tick the boxes on for his own safety and for us as well. So we are following your guidelines, Michael, that you've given us, and it is working very well. And we're going to progress that as when the bike turns up, and then we do more training with the cyclist himself, and then we're going to get some safe working methods of getting to certain MACE projects and some Sir Robert McAlpine projects in central London, on the basis that we're going to be going from Old Kent Road or King's Cross with this particular bike, which we've already trialled and we've actually now purchased. So we're quite happy with how things have developed, and looking at then a second and third bike to put in some of our delivering depots.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dave. No, I think it's important for everybody to work on today. Is it can't be just one group that focuses on it. It's something that everybody needs to. So yes, having a bike's great, but also the bike needs to be accepted in a nice, safe manner at the site it's going to. And this is what we looked at Hackney and with Mace, looking at having infrastructure in place at your site that can accommodate the bike to keep it separated. So start to finish. Sorry, hi Laura.
Hiya. So we've got quite a few questions coming. I can see it's 5 o'clock. I don't know if you just wanted to go through them quickly.
Yes.
Who's typing? Oh, okay, let's stop. Right, okay, so the first question is from Marion Coombs. She said that you've mentioned Lambeth and Hackney's interest. Are there any other boroughs interested? And if so, do you think that they will promote better street facilities for cargo bikes?
Right, so City of London are probably one of the leading boroughs at the moment. Waltham Forest are other ones that are getting involved. With regards to infrastructure, the infrastructure that's going out now has set standards. I'm hoping, I'd need to probably clarify this with the designers on the permanent infrastructure. With the temporary infrastructure, this is something that's still slow going, and it's getting that word out. So there's some work done in the Considered Constructors scheme to promote that. But again, it's down to CLPs, Construction Logistic Plan Training, to ensure people are aware of what they need to be thinking about. Okay, but it's a work in progress, Marion.
So the next question that we've got is, as a previous delivery driver within the city, I find this option great, but are there any plans, this is kind of what we were talking about before a little bit, are there any plans to legalise this in terms of fines, identify bad cyclists, and how we educate every cyclist to follow certain rules in order to avoid accidents and incidents? Right, so I wouldn't be able to answer on the fine side of stuff. Hopefully what I've come across today is making sure there's a nice standard. So we are, if I'm encouraging people to use bikes, I would not want somebody to get hurt. So making sure there's a good standard of approach and having a nice model to incorporate into your business.
I can help with info on fines, Michael, if you want.
Sorry, go on, Steve.
So there is a belief that cyclists are a law unto themselves and not held accountable. It's far from the truth. The Met issues around about 5,500 to 6,500 tickets to cyclists every year. They're held accountable for red light enforcement. Obviously, that is no way just at the hands of the 12 officers that I run. That is across the board. Officers need to be in a position to stop the vehicle safely, just like any other motor vehicle. There are plenty of motor vehicles that commit offences and aren't held accountable. But cyclists absolutely are held accountable. They obviously don't have any requirement to be trained, but they often do partake in borough-based training. Cycle proficiency is very, very common. It still is in many boroughs, oversubscribed. They don't have enough spaces. So there's work to be done on that. There's work that's being done on that. The most commonly enforced cycle ticket is still red light infringement, with about 80% of enforcement being done for that activity. That's part and parcel of what my team does. We enforce cycle enforcement. We're also responsibility for bringing cycle fatalities down to the lowest numbers they've been for probably over a decade, I'll be perfectly honest, but down to 5 and 6 over the last 2 years respectively. So that's a 55% reduction on the previous years. So they are enforced. They are out there being held accountable for the cycling. They are not left alone to be completely unregulated. They do have a proportionate amount of enforcement held against them.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got another question here from Michael. Has there been any initial consultation with transport consultants or those who prepare the outline CLPs at the planning application stage? And what are your thoughts on the use of cargo bikes for small and medium house builders?
So yes, there has, with a couple of consultants. So it's slow going again. It's trying to get that message out. So the idea of having people like Bitter embracing this, because you've got such a wide membership base, to get that word out. We forgot, what was the second part? Sorry.
What are your thoughts on the use of cargo bikes for small and medium house builders?
Yeah, why not? If it's done safely, then it's done right. Why not?
Brilliant. Fred has said that he is new to the discussion on cargo bikes, but trying to gain an appreciation of their potential in terms of the volume of goods currently transported in HGVs, which can be shifted to cargo bikes. Also, is there some thought on how cargo bikes can work with construction consolidation centres? So
I've kind of covered a little bit on this. So yeah, but to get in loads off HGVs is a bit of a challenge. To take the percentage of underutilization of vans is a lot of potential. Consolidation, we're looking at micro consolidation. I think whereabouts did I put this now? The bottom. Here. Yeah, so we are looking at these models within construction. So it's not happened as yet, but although it is in the retail, people are doing this already. A bit of an example there with UPS. And the good thing about micro consolidate, you don't need a lot of space to set some stuff up. Is Steve still on from Jones Brothers?
Still here, Michael.
Hey, how you doing? So I'm just talking about the consolidation side, because I know this is something you're considering. So your consolidation would be a vehicle that go backwards and forwards to?
Yes. So we'd have a micro consolidation centre, say for instance, close to Aldgate, where our customers are. So you'd have one vehicle just topping up the centre or the hub, and the deliveries will be made from there.
I think this is where the bikes come into play, because having that kind of setup with the van wouldn't make sense. So if you had a van going backwards and forwards, it wouldn't make sense. It's easier with a bike, because then you've got more flexibility.
I mean, if you've got sort of, I don't know, if you've got 6 or say we end up with 10 cargo bikes going from that hub, then I think you would need sort of some sort of vehicle, a large one, to sort of top that up.
But then you're reducing the amount of vehicles that you're putting on the road. That's the whole idea of the consolidation.
Yes.
Yeah. And what we'll do is, because I know Steve's about to start roughly next week.
Yes, it was supposed to be the 5th. There was a little bit of a delay from Rayleigh, but we're receiving the bike tomorrow, so we're trialing from the 12th.
Right. Okay. So this is something to get the right PR out. But no, talking about consolidation, it's just looking at the different varieties that you can do with bikes. I think this is where hopefully what the question was about. And does that answer that question? If that person could say yay or no in the chat.
They might have left. Oh, okay. Yeah, they might have left, but okay, that sounded Good, I'm sure they'll be happy.
Okay.
And then we had another question. I've seen bikes in action and I can see the potential for future of construction. I'll be having a conversation with my team about it, and he needs to get a better understanding of the costs. Where can he get more information about the costs from the services by various bike companies?
Yeah, just have a look at, there's Zed, there's Pedal Me, there's some other smaller companies out there that smaller companies that could benefit from the work, actually, especially COVID.
Michael, I've just suggested UK CLF is probably, I've got a lot of contacts. Basically, I've been shifting cargo by bike since 1994, 95. I came back from a European trip with a gross vehicle weight of 250 kilos and a single gear. So it's a bit painful at times, but not to worry. But I think there's a European and the UK Cycle Logistics Federation. There's a mapping system. You can find out who's operating in different areas. They're connected. Zedify is franchised now in Brighton, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Norwich and Cambridge, and they've even got more there. They're also running a consolidation site on the outskirts of Cambridge. I think they're delivering between 60 and 70% of the small packages in central Cambridge. And a stat that came out in '94 from New York was that 90% of the courier packages that were being delivered in the city centre weighed less than 30 kilos. 30 kilos you can carry around on your back or shove on a bike.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know if Ivor's on here. Is Ivor on?
Yeah, I'm on.
Hi, Ivor. So Ivor from UKCLF. If you want to put the contact details in the chat box.
Yep, I can do that. Oh God, I just got to get this to work. I'll mute myself so you don't hear my ramblings. But yeah, I'll put my details in.
Yeah.
Michael, what I can do, because obviously everybody may not have access to this quickly, is tomorrow when we send out the message to everybody, I'll send out a link to this video which will be posted online, and I'll also download and send out the chat as an attachment as well, so people can access everybody's contact details if they've posted them, and check the questions that have been put forward.
Yeah, that sounds good. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, if anybody else has any more questions, I've gone through all the ones that I've seen on the chat function.
Can I add a couple of comments? The New York UPS were using tricycles in New York continuously, and the oldest bike manufacturer in the world is, I think, Worksman of Ozone City in New York. Their success came from selling tricycles to the Boeing Aircraft Company, because all the workers travelled around using Worksman tricycles. And so it shows the use of cargo bikes in the appropriate setting. The other thing I think I'll throw a curveball in is workers getting to site looking in tune with the bicycle, because when you're working on site, you quite often work abnormal hours compared to general public transport. And so construction site workers tend to drive to site. Many of them come fairly short distances, and you have a big problem with where do you put all the workers' cars when you've got a construction site. Do you actually fall out with the local community because all your site workers are parking up around local streets?
I think this is something TfL have been working on with the Santander opportunity, especially in the city area. But yeah, you're right, Dave. I think with COVID, though, it's been a bit more challenging, especially if you've got people coming from slightly longer distances. Anything else on there, Laura?
No, nothing else at the moment. There's been a lot of people sharing information, lots of people saying thanks very much to yourself, Michael, and Sergeant Wilson for their valuable insight. So thank you very much. And that's it. There's a few people that unfortunately have had to leave to jump on a call at 5. So yeah, I think we're done.
Yeah, I'll just say, so thanks for Bitter, number one. So we've got part 3 next week on disability caused by works. So again, this is now going away from the logistics side. But the cargo bike working group is open to anybody that wants to come along to get a better understanding of how it can be utilized. So if you want to get in touch with me, whether it's on LinkedIn, or we could put my email out, I suppose, on
I was
this.
going to say, Michael, are you happy when I send out the email to everybody with the details about this event, I can just put your email address into the email so that they can get in touch with you directly if they want to?
Yeah, please.
Perfect, that's what we'll do then.
And I think that's it then, isn't it?
Okay, lovely.
Thanks
Thanks.
for the time.
Right, cheers.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Michael.
Thank you so